All right, so we're still working on the wiring here, but I've had to figure out exactly where my alternator is going to be at, so I know where the wire's got to go to, and a few other things for clearance issues and stuff. I've got the spacing on my alternator just about where I need it at. It's got a little bit of clearance over the top of the fuel rail, so it's not going to be rubbing on the fuel rail, wearing a hole in it or anything like that. So as long as I was working on the alternator mounting, I decided I would take a look at this belt routing because I want to eliminate my power steering pump. And I figured out, stole this pulley off another motor, that a pulley exactly this size, and I'm going to use the same exact pulley so that it's a part that belongs on this motor and it's easy to find the right part. I'm going to put one of these pulleys right here, pick up on the center hole of the power steering pump. I am going to put a plate across the back that goes over all three holes, so this bolt won't just be holding all of its pressure on just one hole. I'm going to have to trim some of this off, but that shouldn't bother anything because it's really way stronger than it needs to be, even when it's holding the power steering pump up. It turns out that by doing this, and with the space I've got here, the belt turns out to be almost exactly the right length. It may be a little off, and if it is, I've got a little bit more that I can lower this, and I can always make these spacers a little bit longer if the belt is a little bit too short. I've got plenty of room under the trunk of the car, the rear deck of the car, so I don't have to worry about how high this comes up. That's going to work out just fine. So now all I got to do, make a plate, tap a hole in it, order one of these pulleys, and my belt situation should have taken care of itself, I hope. Nothing's tight here, of course, everything's just kind of loosely bolted together, but seems to work. Well, with a sharper blade, it did a little bit better. And then I'm going to just drill a whole bunch of holes real close together and see how that works out for me. Throw a belt across it to see what the clearance is like. Oh yeah. Polish up the rough edges a little bit. I may have to get the die grinder out for this. Well, that looks like that's going to do that. There's about a 1/4 inch of clearance all the way around. Maybe not quite a 1/4 inch right here at the back edge, but that's a pretty short run of belt. I don't think it's going to get bouncing around, whipping around too much. Well, that's one more thing done. Well, that part of it's done. Still got to make this plate. Never throw anything away. We have scrap that I think will make our part. Well, this is just about 1/2 inch thick, so I think that's perfect for what we need. This piece isn't big enough, but that piece is. I drilled the holes in the bracket out to 3/8 of an inch and tapped the holes in the plate for 3/8 inch coarse thread bolts. I tapped out the first hole, got the plate in place with a bolt threaded into it, clamped it up against the bracket, and then center punch marked the other 2 holes. And when I need a nice straight tap hole like this, I just do this to get the tap started. That way I know it started straight, and then I finish it by hand. Guaranteed pretty much to be almost close to perpendicular to being square with the rest of the world. And there we have it, an almost close enough to straight threaded hole. And now the question is, are those holes in the right place? Will they line up with the factory brackets? Well, one hole lines up. Two holes line up. Yep, it's going in. Yep. Fingers crossed. Seems to be lining up, but it seems like there's a burr in the hole. Should have put these bolts through there one time just to make sure there wasn't any trash in the holes. Yep, there's something in that. Blow that out. And on the second attempt, almost like it was made for that. Oh, but it'll actually be a little more like this right here. Now all I need is a spacer behind that. I think I need a little bit of a spacer, but it's pretty close. Maybe a small washer behind it is all. Still waiting for the right pulley. I ordered that off, of course, Amazon. But this one's close enough to get a belt on it and see what it looks like with everything there. I still have to tap a little hole in here for a bracket to hold this up here. Well, there you have it. Belt routing's still the same as stock. Still waiting on a couple of pulleys to come in. Need to replace that idler pulley. Got to get the right pulley for that because that pulley is just flopping around on the bolt. But I believe it'll work. Should work. Ought to work. Might work. It ain't perfect, but it's close enough. And I also deleted the power steering at the other end of the car. I kept the fluid reservoir so that the rack would be lubricated. I wanted to keep the power steering reservoir even though I'm taking the pump out so that I can make sure that there's a little bit of fluid in the rack so none of the seals eat themselves up. I was originally going to put the reservoir down here somewhere and mount it, put a new mount on it, all that good stuff. Well, gotta love it when a plan accidentally comes together because once I pulled everything out of the way, just a little loop of hose right here. This line is big enough to fit over that right there. Cut that tube off. First I had to cut off the U of the bend so I could get to the straight section of pipe that I needed to cut off to make all this possible. Put a couple of clamps to hold it in line. And that'll work. That'll give me a little bit of fluid to recirculate through that, keep everything lubricated. This is the almost completed power steering delete and belt reroute. Still waiting on my new pulleys, but everything is where it's supposed to be. I've got a screw right here to hold this wiring harness. And I've got a screw right here to hold the cam sensor wire, keep it from jumping into the belt. And now we'll go up front to take a look at the power steering hoses for the power steering delete up there. And up here I've gotten all this finished up. I've got my clamps on my hoses, keep them from rattling around, vibrating all over the place. Not sure if this is permanent or not yet because I've still got to route my radiator hoses through here. But by doing it this way, I still have all my lines on my steering rack, and my rack still has a little bit of fluid in it to keep it lubricated when it's being steered. And I believe the front of this is light enough to not need power steering. But if I ever do have to put power steering in it, I might be able to put an electric pump or something like that in it. But Up here is pretty well done as far as fabrication. I'll put a link in the description below for the video on making this cage and putting this tank in. But that's about it for the power steering delete. Thanks for watching. If there's anybody you know might be interested in stuff like this, please share this video. Thank you. All right, like, subscribe, share, leave a comment, and as always, thanks for watching. This is the almost completed, all right, this is the third time trying to do this. The first time, I didn't have the microphone on. The second and third time, I couldn't remember what I was trying to do to this motor, so maybe this time I can remember. And I can remember how to talk, open my mouth, and use my lips and tongue, and let them wiggle around a little bit and form words. All right, so we're still working on the wiring here, but